Hello and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you, Adam, for letting me know that I've been talking for 5 minutes and the sound wasn't working. But hello, welcome. Those of you who are tuning in either live now or later watching this replay at any point in time and you're not familiar with my work, my name is Brian Miller. I am a former professional magician turned author, speaker, and consultant on human connection. My full-time day job right now is I'm an international keynote speaker, and I also work with speakers, aspiring TEDx speakers, and leaders who need to be more influential, especially in short periods of time, to really clarify their message and make a huge impact. And it's no surprise that so many people want to do that. TEDx, Mind Valley, Talks at Google. There's so many different platforms that have made this kind of short form inspirational speaking a really popular format. Now, a few months ago, I kind of on a whim, I did a live analysis of Celeste Headley's 24 million views TEDx talk. It was a super viral talk she did on having better conversations a couple of years ago, and the response was fantastic. People loved this analysis of the script, the structure, the breakdown. I kind of taught a little bit of the stuff that I teach in my courses while we were going along. Storytelling and rise and fall of emotion and rhythm and tone and all those kinds of things, pacing. And what ended up happening is even Celeste herself caught it on the replay and tweeted that she even learned a little bit from my analysis of her speech that she gave a couple of years ago. So people have really responded well, and I've had tons and tons of requests since then from both my coaching clients, my existing students, as well as folks who are subscribed to the email list and find me on YouTube to do more of these. So I thought we would do a very different kind of TEDx talk today. Today we're analyzing Chris Voss's TEDx talk, Never Split the Difference. Now, Chris Voss wrote a book, Never Split the Difference. He is the former lead hostage negotiator for the FBI, lead hostage negotiator. And since then, he has gone into teaching business negotiation and also life negotiation, but mostly working with businesses on a completely new approach to negotiating, because he came from hostage negotiation. And so a lot of the way that we think about negotiating in business today was born in the 80s with getting to yes and all these other kinds of things. And they've hung around for decades in spite of the fact that the culture has changed and the time has moved on. And so Voss completely upended, completely reinvented negotiating for the new world. I can tell you, having read his book a couple of years ago, it completely changed all of my conversations with prospects, clients, the way I communicate in social media and live streams and email conversations. And the thing is, whenever he goes on a podcast somewhere, he has a lot of attention. He ends up getting tons and tons, millions of views on podcasts and other types of speaking engagements that are filmed and put on YouTube. But his TEDx talk has less than 1 million views. Now, it's got like 750,000 views, and for you or me, if we had a video that got 750,000 views, I'm sure we would be just freaking out, celebrating. I know for myself, my TEDx talk, had 3.5 million views, and man, when it hit that mark, when it hit 100,000, I was absolutely out of my mind. But it's interesting that Voss, who gets millions of views on a regular basis for the kind of speaking engagements he does and the kind of podcast interviews he does, that his TEDx talk itself, what for most people is the capstone, the cornerstone, that his TEDx talk did not get nearly as much attention as some of the other ways that he talks about his work, especially his book. His book is, I think, significantly more popular than his TEDx talk is, which to me is really interesting and worth taking a look at. So in this video, we are going to watch Chris Voss's TEDx talk. I'm going to be stopping all the way through it repeatedly to discuss different moves he's making. We're going to talk about the script, the structure, the performance. We're going to talk about the humor. We're going to talk about the pacing, the rhythm, all these different kinds of things. And if you have questions as we go on, drop them in the chat. When I'm done with the analysis, I'll get to any questions as they are coming in. So here we go. Let's get started with Chris Voss and his TEDx talk never split the difference. Here we are.
I was an FBI hostage negotiator. It sounds like a cry for help, doesn't it? There were more.
Let's just start with that right off the bat. So, first words out of his mouth, I was an FBI hostage negotiator. Sounds like a cry for help, doesn't it? So, Voss has immediately set up the audience to know the kind of speech they're about to hear. He did it incredibly quickly, and this is such a useful thing for speakers to do. A lot of speakers make the mistake of starting their presentations by kind of warming up the audience. Hey, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. Oh man, I'm so excited to be here. Voss doesn't do that. Professional speakers don't do that. He took the stage. He's on that red dot, so to speak, and he opened with his opening line. He didn't open with some warm-up first and then get into his opening line. He didn't even introduce himself. He didn't say his name. A lot of people say, hi, I'm Chris Voss, I'm Brian Miller, right? He didn't do that. He introduced himself as what was relevant to the talk itself. So let's just go ahead and back that up so you can just hear how powerful coming on the stage and opening with your actual opening line is.
I was an FBI hostage negotiator. It sounds like a cry for help, doesn't it? There were more people working in the federal building I worked in New York City than the small town in Iowa I grew up in. My mom is still trying to figure out how all that happened. My mom, by the way, is a loving, no-nonsense, hardworking Midwestern mom who says what she means. You know what the difference between that kind of mom and a terrorist is? You can negotiate with a terrorist.
All right, let's pause on that joke. The difference between that kind of mom and a terrorist is you can negotiate with a terrorist. What's interesting to me about that joke is that first, it is really funny, and you can see that he delivered it confidently knowing it was going to get a laugh. This is clearly somebody who has spoken a lot, who has used this joke before. I don't believe for a second that that joke was written for this talk and that he had never actually delivered that in front of an audience before. He said that knowing it was going to get a laugh. Now, one of the things I work with my speakers on a lot is a lot of people want to try to get humor. They want to try to get laughs into their speeches because it's a great way to engage with the audience, to connect with them. People laugh, they like you. But the problem is, unless you are a professional comedian or a professional speaker who has rehearsed and done this stuff on stage over and over and over, going for a laugh, trying to get the audience to laugh, if you're not sure it's going to work, is really, really dangerous. It's really dangerous. Here, you can see in the confidence he delivered that line, he knew they were going to laugh. And the reason I can tell that he knew they were going to laugh is because he delivered the punchline and he stopped for the laugh. What people tend to do when they're not sure if it's going to get a laugh is they hit the punchline and then they kind of go, ha, ha, ha. They kind of laugh at it themselves, hoping that it will goose the audience to come along with them and get that it was a joke. They try to help the audience understand it's a joke by immediately laughing themselves. He didn't do that. He delivered the line. The difference between that type of a mom and a terrorist is you can negotiate with a terrorist. And he stopped because he knew the laugh was coming. I don't recommend going for such a joke. I mean, that was like a joke, set up punchline, right? A traditionally crafted joke. I don't recommend writing those types of jokes unless you already know for sure, based on experience like he does, that it's going to get a laugh. But it was very funny. Let's keep going.
I see there are similar experiences out there. When you're an FBI hostage negotiator, you deal with the mad, the bad, and the sad, to quote Tom Strentz, the godfather of the FBI's hostage negotiation program. That means you believe you never split the difference. How are you supposed to split the difference with some bad guy who's got 4 hostages, he wants a jet to Cuba and $1 million? You say, all right, we'll take 2 hostages, we'll give you a helicopter to New Jersey, and you take an Uber from there.
So again, he's set a tone so quickly. We are only a minute in and he's gotten a number of laughs, which means this is going to be a light talk. That's what he's saying to the audience by getting this many laughs, is that I'm going to be talking about something serious, but we're going to talk about it in a lighthearted way. It lets the audience sit back and relax. It's a very different sort of tone than when somebody has a deep story about trauma or something that's really, really heavy and emotional, and the audience feels this tension come up over them, like we're about to hear something really serious, like I gotta get into that mindset. Here, Voss is just keeping it light and keeping it moving. I will say, he hit the main idea of the talk, never split the difference, and just moved right through it. He didn't pause on it at all. And I suspect what happened here is he is used to the fact as a professional speaker that the audience knows what the talk is about before he hits the stage, right? So like when I'm keynoting a conference, the title of my talk, a 3 or 4 sentence description of what I'm going to talk about, it's in the brochure. People know on the schedule, sometimes for months in advance or 6 months or a year in advance, what exactly I'm going to talk about. So knowing that as a speaker at a conference, you don't need to belabor the point of here's what I'm here to talk about. The thing is, with a talk like this that's getting filmed for YouTube, where the majority of the people that ever watch it will be on YouTube, will not be there on the day that you're giving it live, if you skip too quickly over the main gist of the talk, the point of the talk, the idea worth spreading, as it were, which in this case is never split the difference, then somebody watching it at home is less likely to be able to really get on board with the idea and follow it. Because if you just tuned out for a half a second as he said never split the difference, and then he explained in like one sentence or basically a joke what it means to split the difference and why, basically this talks to me why you should never do that. If you tuned out for even half a second, checked your Instagram, somebody mentioned something, you turned to look that way and came back, that's it. You're going to be lost for the rest of this. I just want to back up and show you just how quickly he moved through that, the idea worth spreading.
Negotiation program that means you believe you never split the difference. How are you supposed to split the difference with some bad guy who's got 4 hostages, he wants a jet to Cuba and $1 million? You say, all right, we'll take 2 hostages, we'll give you a helicopter to New Jersey, and you take an Uber from there.
And another thing on the humor here. Now, this is another joke that he's hit us, right, as we're going on, as we're only a minute and a half into the talk. The danger of having this much humor is that the audience gets wrapped up in how funny it is, and you actually lose the thread, that the audience they forget what the talk is actually about because they're just laughing all the time, right? This is a problem that I encountered for many, many years when I was a comedy magician. The hardest thing about being a comedy magician is when to be funny and when not to be, because the problem is if you're funny, if you're really funny, the audience is laughing so hard that they'll miss the magic, that the magic will get sidelined by the comedy, because laughter is such a powerful emotion that you want to be really careful. If you're really funny, and some people are really funny, they're great, funny comedy writers, they have a great personality on stage. Sometimes if you're trying to deliver an important message, an idea worth spreading, the hardest thing that you have to do is to restrain yourself from being funny, because when you know how to be funny, it's addicting to be funny. And Chris Voss is addicted to being funny. I've watched him in 1 million interviews. I've watched him in 1 million podcasts. He loves being funny. He loves getting the laugh. But when you get the laugh, the audience's brain it clicks for a second. It tunes out the message. And when you only have 7 or 8 minutes, like he's doing a quick talk, what is this talk? Maybe 12 minutes or something like that. When you have 10 or 12 minutes, man, you need to make sure that they're getting the message. So something to consider. Let's move on.
Of course not. One of the myths I'd like to dispel about hostage negotiators as well is that we can say whatever we want to get our way because these are one-off negotiations and we're never going to see the bad guy again. Well, hostage negotiators have repeat customers. It was a siege in a major city in the U.S. The bad guy was on a run for 10 days after having murdered 4 people. They finally get him cornered. He's got 2 hostages. The negotiator gets on the phone with them. The negotiator's a little excited. And the bad guy literally says to him on the phone, "You're not doing a good job. You're supposed to be establishing rapport with me." He'd been barricaded before. If the negotiator before would have lied to him or said what he had to say to get him out of there, lives would have been lost on down the line. So we have repeat customers. We believe in reputation. We have integrity.
And here what he's doing is he's doing something actually very difficult here. And again, he's doing it through humor, so I'm not going to keep hitting that point because we've talked about it a lot already. But what he's doing is he's bringing you into the world of being an FBI hostage negotiator, because this is a world that none of us have any experience with. Very, very few people watching this will have ever actually experienced this. That's not who the talk is for. It's for the rest of us. And so in order for this talk to be meaningful, for you to get the idea of what he's explaining here, you do need to understand the world of a hostage negotiator. And instead of just explaining the job, he's doing it through vignettes, through these tiny little stories that are, 20 seconds here, 30 seconds here. Storytelling, as we know, is the heart and soul of TED, and more specifically TEDx, right? Storytelling has become a huge buzzword in the business community and in just kind of in general over the last decade or so. And what I was literally I'm working on a blog right now that I'm in the middle of writing that I'll get back to when I'm done with this live stream about this exact issue, which is we've heard the term storytelling so many times over the last decade or so from TED and all these talks at Google and Mind Valley, and from like Donald Miller's Story Brand, and we hear about the Story Circle and all this stuff, and it's wonderful. I agree. Storytelling is absolutely the way to move people, right? If you want to bore people, give them facts. If you want to move them to action, tell them a story. I say that to my students all the time. But there's this idea when we get obsessed with storytelling that we're supposed to go into the minutia, the detail, that we're supposed to explain how how the dirt felt kicking up against our ankles and the wind breezed gently across our cheek. Sometimes when people tell stories because they think that's what storytelling is, it sounds like a 10th grader that's just like trying to add words to fill up a word count for an English project, right? And good to see you here, Neil. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you being here. So yeah, a lot of times people get this idea because storytelling has become just such a hashtag that they're supposed to go into minutia. And Chris doesn't do that. He's so good at telling stories really, really quickly, and what we might call a vignette, like I mentioned before. So what he's doing here in this part of the talk, and we're only, 2 minutes in, is he's bringing you into the world. What is it like to be an FBI hostage negotiator? What kinds of situations do they encounter? You need to know this stuff, and he's doing it in these little 20-second vignettes, these mini stories with almost no detail, just the main gist of what you need to know.
So, one night, I walk into a bar with 3 other hostage negotiators. Now, I realize that sounds like a joke. 4 hostage negotiators walk into a bar, and they don't pay for anything.
I gotta tell you, that is a joke. That one right there, I could have done without in this talk. And I'm going to explain why real quickly. He's already established he's funny. We know he's funny. We're 2.5 minutes in to a 10-minute talk. We're a quarter of the way in or whatever it is. And he's still hammering us with jokes. This is starting to turn into a stand-up comedy set. And we're starting to just lose the thread like we talked about earlier. He had already gotten a laugh on that joke. He had already gotten the laugh. 4 FBI hostage negotiators walk into a bar, right? And, I realize that sounds like a joke, right? It was a meta joke because I realize that sounds like a joke. He got the laugh, but then he couldn't resist doing what comedians call a tag, which is an additional joke that relies on information you already have from the joke itself, which is he said, and they don't pay for anything, right? In other words, he's referring to the fact that a negotiator could negotiate with, an FBI hostage negotiator could negotiate to get free drinks and free food and whatever. Obviously, that's funny, and it's funny. And if he was doing his hour-long keynote, yeah, keep him laughing for the first 5, 6, 8 minutes because you got an hour. But in 10 minutes, I just feel like that was a lack of restraint on his part. I'm curious if that was even written into the script, or I wonder if his coach, whoever his speaking coach is, had him take out a line like that, and he just couldn't help himself and shoved it back in. It looked like he decided at the very last second. I want to back up for a second. I think he decided at the very last second to toss that tag in. It's clearly something he's said before.
Negotiators. Now, I realize that sounds like a joke. 4 hostage negotiators walk into a bar, and they don't pay for anything.
It really seems like he decided at the last second there to toss that tag in. Anyway.
But this actually happened. The 4 of us walk into the bar, and the place is packed. It is jumping. And I look around, I see a seat empty at the bar, and I go over and get ready to sit down in it. And the guy sitting next to the seat says, "Don't even think about it." Now, I'm a hostage negotiator. I'm going to talk to this guy. So I say, "Why is that?" He says, "Because I'll kick your ass." I say, "I don't need that. I'm Chris." And I hold out my hand. The other negotiators with me swoop in. They put their arms around me and say, "Hey, how you doing? Let us talk to you. You know, what's going on? Let's see what's going on."
What you're hearing right now, you hear the audience bursting out in laughter right now when he didn't tell a joke. Nothing about that was funny, and the audience is laughing. That is exactly what I was talking about this entire time, about being too funny. If you're too funny, the audience starts to think that this is a comedy act, right? That not consciously, but unconsciously, they start to think, oh, I'm expecting everything to be a joke. He's told so many jokes so quickly that the audience isn't actually listening anymore. They're not taking him seriously. They're looking for the punchline. And this, I have a feeling, is exactly why the TEDx talk itself has not done nearly as well. It's got 750,000 views. It's doing fine. But it hasn't done nearly as well as so many of his other pieces of work, his podcast interviews and his other recorded speeches that are all over YouTube, and his book itself and the audiobook. This is just turned into like a late night comedy set, and you can see it right there where the audience is laughing and distracting themselves from the message. So there it is.
We find out this guy's a former Vietnam vet, and his life is in a shambles. It's a mess. No job, no girlfriend. He's out. He perceives the world as celebrating and happy. And he's miserable, and that's why the seat's empty. You know, everybody tried to sit down there. He offered to fight him. Now, I know from hostage negotiation, if we get the hostage takers to use the hostage's name, it makes it much, much harder for them to hurt him. When I'm some nameless guy, he's ready to hit me. As soon as I become Chris, everything changes. Now, how was I supposed to split the difference with that guy anyway? Sit on his lap? Sit under the chair?
So here he delivered the first really important piece of information in terms of the takeaways for the audience, what we're here to learn, because ultimately that's what you have to consider when you're a speaker. Is you're not just here for fun, right? The audience is here to listen to gain something from this for their lives. The audience is always thinking, what's in it for me? What do I get from watching this? Especially when there's an infinite amount of things I could be watching, giving my time to. What's in it for me? What do I gain from this? And this was the first tip, which was to use your name. But again, he's kind of skating past it, and then he used a joke right at the end of it, which means it's just floating around in the ether now. I feel like I did not intend for this entire thing to be about the use of humor in speaking, but clearly that's what this entire thing has become. And it's really, really worth considering, which is that idea, and I know this because I've read his book inside and out, that idea of introducing yourself, of using your name at the start of a negotiation, that when somebody has your name, now you're a real person. You're not just this abstract idea. You're not a stranger anymore. If I say, if I'm working with a hotel and they don't have the room ready for me, they don't rental car place doesn't have the reservation that I had, or whatever it is. If I say, hey, by the way, I'm Brian. How's your day going? Just all of a sudden being Brian as opposed to this idiot customer or just another pain in my ass customer today. It makes a huge difference. And I know this because I've done it. This technique he's teaching works, and it works really, really well. But he skated right past it again. I'm just going to back up so you can see that he hits it. He hits it, and it's like it's right there for him to just hit this point and let it land. But he hits a joke again the second it's over.
When I'm some nameless guy, he's ready to hit me. As soon as I become Chris, everything changes. And how was I supposed to split the difference with that guy anyway? Sit on his lap?
Right? 6 seconds after he delivered the point, he got another laugh. What does that do? It erases the point. Our brains tune out. They click away.
Sit under the chair? Right, so what do you do if you're armed with this tactical empathy from hostage negotiation after you leave the FBI and you're looking for gainful employment? How do you find a real job? And you write a book. I wrote the book, Never Split the Difference, with Tal Raz and Brandon Voss, about applying the tactical empathy from hostage negotiation to the bullies and the liars that we encounter every day, to the bad, the mad, and the sad we run into in our jobs, in our social interactions, at our family gatherings, at the breakfast table. I saw a meme recently.
So this is actually really useful. So what he's doing right now is he's making the pivot into like the main gist of the speech, which I think took too long to get there. He's 4.5 minutes in to whatever it is, 10 or 12 minute speech, and he's really just getting to the main point of what he's here to talk about. In my opinion, he's spent way too much time setting up the speech before he got to the point where he really hit the idea, which is, I'm here to talk about what I've learned from being a hostage negotiator and how you can apply it to even conversations around the breakfast table, negotiations at the office, arguments over Thanksgiving, that kind of thing, where he's saying right now to the audience, this is what you're going to get from listening to me. But it took 4.5 minutes to get there. And in a world of 3-second attention spans, when there's an infinite amount of things to watch, it's too long. It's just too long. Which is too bad because there's so much good info, and I feel like he wasted half of the first half on jokes that just weren't necessary. So much of the time that he wasted here was on jokes when he could have gotten 1 or 2 laughs very quickly, established that he was funny, and then just sprinkled in a little bit of humor throughout the rest of it. A lot of wasted time. Also, he brought up the fact that he wrote a book. And here is something for you, aspiring TEDx speakers out there. If you've written a book or if you're writing a book on the topic of your TEDx talk, this is not something that you're going to bring up in your talk. Chris Voss got away with it. His organizers of his TEDx conference clearly let him do that. Most of them will not, because it's explicitly against the TEDx rules, against the TED rules, to be self-promotional. And so even if the talk you're giving is about the ideas in your book, you can give the talk about the ideas in your book, but it can't be about your book. And basically every TEDx organizer will not let you do what he just did, which is directly mention his book and the name of his book, right? Because that's self-promotional. Why did he get away with it? Probably because he was already a New York Times bestselling author and a huge deal, and it was a massive honor for them to, for his conference to have him there. So he probably got a little bit more leeway than you or I would. So that's something really important to remember here.
I thought it was really funny. It said, this parenting is really wearing me out. I think I'll try something less stressful, like being a hostage negotiator. Tactical empathy, weapons grade empathy. Did you ever imagine hearing those two words combined in the same sentence?
Can you imagine if he had called this talk weapons grade empathy? How many more people might have clicked on it? Obviously, he called the talk Never Split the Difference because it was the same title as the book, and he wanted the talk to support the book and the book to support the talk, right? This is which is what I was just talking about. It's clearly self-promotional in the sense that this TEDx talk, he's here to entertain. He's entertaining here. He's not really delivering the goods the way he does in all the other stuff that he does across the internet, right? He's really just entertaining around the idea of the book, and the title of the talk is the title of the book, so it all works with search engine optimization in Google, and that's just, that's just a little frustrating, because weapons grade empathy, man, that would have been a great title for a talk. Wouldn't you click on that? I'd click on that.
It never split the difference. We define tactical empathy as simply taking an inventory of the perspective of the person you're talking to the adversary, the counterpart, especially the parts that we don't like, and then telling them what it is, describing it back to them calmly. No denials, no disagreements, calmly. Now, tactical empathy works because we all possess this human nature wiring. It works on a human nature level. We've got something in our brains called the limbic system. Everybody has it. It's components of the brain. It doesn't matter what your gender, your ethnicity, or where you grew up. You have a limbic system, and everyone has that. That's the reason every hostage negotiation team in the world, from Baghdad to Bogota to Boston, uses the same skills.
And what he's doing here is actually really, really good. This is where Chris Voss, the professional speaker, is actually coming out, as opposed to like Chris Voss, the I'm going to be a stand-up comedian during my TEDx talk thing has been going on. You can see him turning here, kind of shifting back into what he really does for a living and how good he really is at it, which is he knows this stuff cold and he teaches it, and he's a magnificent professional speaker, exceptional keynoter, and workshop facilitator, and all of those things. And you could feel him just shifting back away from the stand-up comedian persona here. What he's doing right now is something that I teach in the all of my students in the body of your TEDx talk. After you've done your intro and then you've introduced yourself and why you're the mentor figure, and I call that the Meet Your Mentor section. And I talked about that in my previous TEDx analysis for Celeste Headley's, so go watch that one if you want more on that. She does that really, really well, the Meet Your Mentor section. But then you get into the main body of the talk. And I teach you to do three things in the main body. The first is basically to describe and attempt to solve the problem that you're dealing with in your talk that did not work. He's done that a little bit. He's done that through the humor, through the vignettes, through the anecdotes, through the comedy about different ways that splitting the difference would not work. Right? What am I supposed to do? Sit on his lap, sit under the chair, right? He's kind of explained it, but again, it got lost in the humor. Okay, we belabored that point. But now he's doing the second thing that I coach all of my speakers to do right in the middle of the body of the talk, which is this is the section to bring in studies, statistics, science, research, the stuff that grounds what you're talking about, especially if your talk is fundamentally inspirational. You got to ground it somewhere. That's what he's bringing in here. The thing is, he actually knows what he's talking about with this stuff. To me, I've heard so many speakers who are not themselves researchers talk about things like the limbic system and stuff like that, when clearly they're not researchers, they are not specialists in that. It just sounds like kind of scientific gobbledygook to me, because I've heard that so many times from people who are just using the words that sound good, that sound scientific. To be fair to Chris, his book is unbelievably well researched. This stuff is legit. He's worked with serious research institutions, so he really does know what he's talking about here. And you can feel it in the gravitas with which he shifted out of the comedian persona into the professional persona.
Human nature wiring that we all possess. Now that's its shortcoming. It only works with people. So I'll give you another human nature secret, insider's tip. We all have one way we tell the truth, one way. We might lie 5 to 7 different ways, but you've got one way you tell the truth, and that's the way a polygraph works, and the way Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was identified by 2 colleagues of mine as a mastermind in 9/11. Now, the way a polygraph works is you come inside, they sit you down, they hook you up to this machine, they put all these wires and these gauges on you, and they ask you a series of control questions to lay down your one way of telling the truth. You know, what day is it? Where are you? What's your name? What'd you have for breakfast? They get your baseline for truth telling. Then they ask you the hard questions. Did the dog really eat your homework? Were you really in a bathroom when a fight broke out? It doesn't matter which of the many ways you might come out of your truth telling. The only thing that matters is that you came out of the truth telling baseline. Now, a few months after 9/11,
so here, even though he went for a joke there and it didn't work, and you could feel that, did the dog really eat your homework or whatever that was? He went for a joke and it didn't land. But the point is, wasn't that so much more interesting than the joke thing at the beginning of the talk. Because here, you're learning something. If you're not an FBI hostage negotiator, you don't know anything about that world. Here, he's really actually teaching you about the way that these things work. I find that when he's talking about how a polygraph works and lying versus truth-telling, so many different ways to lie, but only one way to tell the truth, and getting a baseline and veering away from it, to me, that's really interesting. That's really gripping. It reminds me of all those videos you see on YouTube now that, like Insider does them and some other places do them, where they have like a real-life expert kind of discuss movies and TV scenes based on their field, real life, expert in money laundering, FBI expert in money laundering, discusses the validity of money laundering scenes in movies and TV. And the reason those kinds of videos are so popular is because we love to find out about the nitty gritty inner workings of these worlds that we only usually hear about in fiction. Well, he's got those kinds of stories. He knows this stuff that we want to know about. And it took him until freaking 7 minutes into a 10, 12-minute talk to get to that stuff. That's the stuff that would be so much more compelling to me than the joke thing that he did in the entire first half.
A secret government agency had a terrorist in custody in a secret location outside the United States. The terrorist was badly wounded. And they were worried that he was going to die, and they needed to get somebody in to interview him that knew the substance of the case. And 2 colleagues of mine were the only ones close by. And the reason why they were worried this guy was going to die and move on to the next life was the only reason that they were going to let my colleagues come in, let FBI agents come in and talk to him. So they get together and they say, they've got a picture of the person they know to be the organizer of 9/11, but the picture's not good enough for them to be able to tell exactly who it is. So they say, we just talk to this guy long enough till we know what he looks like when he tells the truth. And then we lay the picture on him, see what he says. So they talk to him, they show him the picture, and they say, who is this? And he looks at him and says, you know who it is? And they go, no, we don't. That's why we're asking. He says, it's Ramsey's uncle. The Ramsey he's talking about is Ramsey Youssef, who's in an American prison doing life. And he's a mastermind of the first World Trade Center attack back in 1993. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is his uncle, in fact, the organizer of the 9/11 attack. And the interesting part about this at the time is most of the US government doesn't think Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is involved with Al-Qaeda at all, let alone organizing the attack. And that's how he was identified, with that human nature truth. Now, what's the point?
That's a professional speaker who knows exactly what they're doing. So first, that was the longest segment of this entire talk without a joke. And thank goodness for that he had the restraint there to tell that really serious story that's connected to 9/11 and previous World Trade Center attacks and things like that he could tell that story, get through all the details, and give you everything you need to know without resorting to a laugh, without going for a laugh. Because that's something that we need to do out of respect for our audiences. And this is related to what I was talking about earlier about if you're a funny person, it's so easy to go for the joke. It's very addicting to go for the joke. The restraint, the confidence it takes to just sit in a moment with the audience, to just let something that's heavy or serious or meaningful or impactful, to just let it be. Right? To let the words stay there, to let them swirl around the audience's brain, to give the audience the space to think about what that means. It's really hard to do that. Silence is very scary when you're in front of a live audience, especially when there's it looks like for him maybe 1,000 people in a giant auditorium or a theater, or 500 people or whatever it is, even if it's 50 people. To have that pin drop where people are just listening. Your instinct sometimes as a speaker is like, oh, they're finding this boring, right? Because they're not laughing, they're not applauding, they're not smiling. Oh, maybe they find this boring. Let me try to get a joke. Let me move quickly through this. Let me jump to the next section. But the confidence This is earned confidence. This is the kind of thing that takes a lot of practice in front of live audiences as a speaker, right? You're not going to get this right if you're the first time out or if you're just starting to do this. The confidence to just sit in the silence and let the audience appreciate what you just said and internalize it and think about it. It's very, very powerful. And this is where the professional's coming out in Chris Voss. I wish the whole talk had started kind of halfway through this TEDx. But what he just did is he said, so what's the point? He literally said those words. So what's the point? This is an underrated and underutilized technique. I use it all the time. I try to teach my students to use it. Whenever you've told a story for a while that is context for the message, context for the idea where it's spreading, an action step is coming, something that you want the audience to take away is coming, but you've told this story to get them into the right mindset, before delivering the action step, before delivering the big idea, before giving them the thing that you want them to take away, indicate verbally, obviously, be super obvious that the point is coming now. People like that. It's really helpful for the audience to go, so what's the point? Which tells the audience, and now the whole idea is coming. This literally, when I do that in my keynotes, when I go, so why am I telling you this? I'll literally see people pick up their pen and paper in that moment. I'll go, so why did I just tell you that? As soon as I say that, they go, oh, this is the thing I'm going to need to write down, right? These are the notes I'm going to need to make. It's such an easy thing to do that so many people skip over. So here we go.
What is that even terrorists are humans, and there are human nature rules that apply to all of us in all situations. So several years ago, while I'm still with the FBI, I'm up at Harvard Law School's negotiation course, and I'm going through their negotiation course because Harvard and the FBI have the same definition of empathy. Bob Mnookin, the head of their program on negotiation, says empathy is just describing and demonstrating an understanding of the needs, interests, and perspective of your counterpart without necessarily agreeing. And he goes on to say, it's not about liking or sympathy in any way. And I'm thinking, I can get behind that. How am I supposed to like a terrorist? This is perfect. In sum and substance, the FBI on one hand and Harvard on the other have the same definition of empathy. So while I'm up there, I'm looking for some more academic, scientific evidence that backs this idea up of universal human nature wiring. And one of the brilliant instructors up there, Sheila Heen, talks about a book called Descartes' Error. And it's a study and scientific proof that emotions are intertwined in all of our decisions. We make our decisions based on what we care about, which makes decision-making by definition of emotional process. And I'm thinking, perfect, eureka, this is exactly what I'm looking for. The only problem is, I've never heard of the philosopher named Descartes, so I write down Dick Hart, D-I-C-K.
Do I even need to address what just happened? We got so much information there. He's telling this story. We're waiting for the point, right? He said, so what's the point? So I know, okay, the point's coming, and I'm waiting, and he's telling me a story. Now he's talking about Harvard, and I'm waiting for the point, and I'm waiting for the point. And now we've got a joke about Dick Hart instead of Descartes. What's the point, Chris? Give me the point. I'm waiting for the point. You said the point's coming. Where is it?
D-I-C-K-H-E-A-R-T, Dick Hart. And I go home and I Google Dick Hart and I can't find him anywhere. I'm thinking, I don't know why Sheila's so impressed with this guy. Nobody ever heard of him. Dick Hart's error is that he needs a PR person so people know who the heck he is.
It's very funny.
Eventually, though, I do figure it out. All right, last story.
Now, wait a second. Now, last story. What was the point? Did it just go in the chat and tell me if you caught the point? He said, so what's the point? And then he told a whole story about Harvard and then not understanding Descartes was actually Descartes, and he Googled Dick Hart and then he said, so one last story. So he's going on to another story. What was the point? Did I miss it somewhere? Did I miss it? Somebody tell me if I missed it. What was the point of that. It's no use having that great technique of saying, so what's the point? So that the audience realizes, here it is, the point's coming. If you don't immediately deliver the point, you can't tell another story that ends in a joke and then keep moving on. I mean, you can, obviously. It's got 750,000 views. I expect that most of these views are because he is funny and this was funny to listen to, and that most people, Neil says, I missed it too. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking to myself, like, am I distracted because I'm doing a live stream and watching the comments and watching my time and all this stuff, and I just missed it somehow? And the thing is, I haven't seen this talk in years. I watched it once when it first came out, and I haven't seen it since until right now. I resisted the urge to watch it before doing this live stream so that I could react in real time like somebody watching it, essentially for the first time. And I have no idea what point he's making. We are almost done with the talk. We're 10.5 minutes in. We've got about a minute left. I have no idea what the idea worth spreading in this talk is. In theory, right, theoretically, the idea worth spreading is never split the difference. But why? For what reason? How does that help me? In what way? It's not clear here, which is just such a shame because he's so clear in so much of his media. The book is crystal clear, super action oriented. His podcast interviews and all the keynotes that have been uploaded, and his group, the Black Swan group, their emails are so good. His Instagram is so good. What happened in this talk? I chose his talk because I was expecting to just be loving this and raving about. I genuinely chose his talk because I was expecting to just be raving about what a masterful TEDx talk it is. Unfortunately, I hope he never sees this. Unfortunately, it's kind of, for me, been something of a letdown, which is just too bad because I'm such a huge fan of Chris and his work and the way that he, and I know he's a magnificent speaker. It's not like I don't think that. I do, but the craft of this particular TEDx talk just for me missed the mark. So let's see how the ending comes in.
A friend, a colleague, a client uses a transformative skill of tactical empathy to cut million-dollar deals in the tech sector. He's enormously successful. He's at a family gathering. His youngest sister has had too much to drink. Now, his youngest sister is a primary caregiver of their dying father, and the stress on her is enormous. And he's seen her before at these types of gatherings lash out at other people when she starts in on him. And he realizes now it's his turn. He sent me an email that said, I just wanted to make her feel heard and to not dispute a thing that she said. It went on for an hour. The next day, she sends him an email that says, yesterday I attacked you, and you showed me nothing but love. Thank you for being my big brother. Ladies and gentlemen, the bad, the mad, and the sad are everywhere. They're us. Don't let just terrorists and bank robbers be the beneficiary of this transformative skill. Use tactical empathy on the people you talk to, your adversaries. Turn them into counterparts. Turn them into loved ones. And never split the difference. Thank you.
Now that ending gave me chills. That ending was so good. It felt like an ending to a different talk. The ending in and of itself, it was such a masterful wrap up and a return, like a callback to the main idea where it's spreading. It did all the things I want my speakers to do in their endings. But it was like it was an ending to a different talk. I mean, let me know in the chat, in the comments, if you got chills, like if you thought, like, oh my God, like that was so powerful. And what's fascinating about that, what's so fascinating about having nailed the ending is if somebody made it all the way there, let's say somebody was just along for the ride, they decided to watch the whole video, even though it was a little confused and it was kind of a stand-up comedy set and blah, blah, blah. They got all the way to the end. What's amazing about being closing powerfully is that there's only two things that the audience remembers about a talk. They only remember the first thing you say and the last thing you say. All they remember about the middle of your talk is how you made them feel. That's it. They remember the first thing and the last thing. So in Chris's case, in spite of all the critique that I just gave in that whole middle of the talk, first thing he did was get a laugh. Audience likes him right away. Last thing he did was deliver a really powerful plea for for tactical empathy and for reaching understanding with the people in your life. And he did it without going for a joke. He did it without undercutting himself. And he left them with the idea worth spreading, the sticky thing he wanted everybody to remember, never split the difference. So he opened with a laugh and he closed super strong, which means people are going to think it was a great talk. And that's the power of getting your openings and your closings right, is that even if you kind of botch the body of the talk, the middle of the talk, or as a magician, even if you kind of botched the middle of your show, right? If you had your first trick was awesome and your last trick was amazing, people walked out thinking the whole show was amazing. It's why there's so much weight on the opening and the closing, an unreasonable amount of weight. What I will say is that, again, in an age of 3-second attention spans with an infinite amount of content to watch, I doubt, and I don't have the analytics, I can't go look at the analytics of this talk, I doubt very many of the 750,000 people that watched this talk made it to the end. I'm guessing the vast majority of them, at least half if not more, clicked off before they ever got to that powerful ending because the middle of the talk was just so confused and lacking clarity and lacking a main driving point. So that is my analysis of the script, structure, and performance of Chris Voss's TEDx talk, Never Split the Difference. I think the script was, I don't know, mildly a disaster. It felt like it was pulled, just pieces were pulled from his keynote or from his workshops and just shoved into a short little talk. I felt like the script was meant for a stand-up comedian, not for a TEDx speaker. I felt like the structure was okay. The structure was okay, but it did not set up the idea worth spreading well. The body of the talk never really ever. It was much less than the sum of its parts. The performance was excellent. As performances go, Chris is a masterful speaker. He's really funny. He's got great tone and rhythm and diction. So like the performance was excellent, and he nailed the closing. But I hope that this analysis was useful, whether you're here live or whether you're watching this on the replay. Anybody who is interested in leveling up, learning how to be a masterful speaker, how to be influential, especially in short form speaking, whether it's a boardroom presentation or whether it's you're an aspiring TEDx speaker or you're a leader of an organization who's giving who needs to motivate all of your employees or your management, your team. Head to conquerthered.com. You'll find information on both of my programs, the self-paced online course, which you can go ahead and use a coupon code VOSS50 for 50% off. 50% off the self-paced online course. That's the largest discount I ever give, and I only give it during these lives. I'll leave that coupon code available for the next few days or a week or so. So there's no time pressure on it. I don't like when people do time pressure stuff. But if you go to brianmiller.podia.com, you'll see the Conquer the Red Dot program, which you can also find a link to from conquerthereddot.com. You'll also find on conquerthereddot.com information about my one-on-one TEDx coaching. I do currently have a full client roster. I am completely booked up, but of course, that's only at the time of saying this recording. And I always do discovery calls with people, even if I'm fully booked, because openings come up every 4 to 6 weeks when I'm in between sessions with other speakers, when speakers are applying to TEDx talks and waiting to find out which ones they got accepted to and things like that. So I hope this was all super useful. And this is great. Neil, if you enjoyed this, definitely let me know. Let me know if there's a specific TEDx talk or other short form inspirational talk that you would like to see me react to and analyze, whether it's from a super, super famous speaker we've all heard of or somebody we've never heard of that only has a couple thousand or a couple hundred views. Whatever it is, feel free to give me suggestions for what you'd like to see next time. Having said all of that, thanks so much for sticking with me. My name is Brian Miller. Always remember, our world is a shared experience. Every interaction is meaningful, and every person you meet, even virtually, is important. And we'll see you next time.